Good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, our independent member, Murray Harrington, council staff and management, public and the press. Also the people who are following us on live view. Welcome to the Audit and Risk Finance Committee, the 3rd of September 2020. Is there any extraordinary business? Declarations of interest. Then we go to point 4. Audit and Risk Finance Committee agenda, not the agenda, from the 9th of July 2020. Are there any corrections to the minutes? No one? Can I have a mover and a second? Those ones are right. Please push your buttons. I've got...
I'll move it. Thank you.
Ms. McMillan, Councillor McMillan and Councillor Wilson. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Except for that. We go to point 5, Insurance 2020-2021. It's a recommendation to the Council. Paul, you want to speak to it? Or Rachel? What is the easiest?
I'll just take it as read. I've got nothing to add, but happy to answer questions.
That's fine. Are there any questions? Who's the name Spear? Just one moment. Which one is the Spear one? I've got a light showing that tells me Spear. Okay, I'm not sure who that is. We find out. Councillor Flynn, you're the first one on my list.
Yeah, just a question. I mean, the sum is not huge, but the increase is significant for professional indemnity and general liability, go up by 38.8%. Is there any particular reason, or is it just a worldwide increase in PI claims, or what is it?
Rachel?
So the Chair, it's not so much claims that we've made, it's more the costs of reinsurance. So across the board, we have had indications from our insurance broker, who we use Marsh Insurance, so they're global. Costs of insurance are going up a lot around the world, and so we will see further increases going forward as well. Particular types of insurance are probably more likely to go up in bigger increases in the future. It's all down to risk and what the reinsurers are willing to cover. That's why the costs go up.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you, I just have a few questions just to clarify on how the report comes. Where are you, Rachel? Oh, you're there. On to how the report comes to being. Do we do you go to the broker and get multiple quotes? Or how does that? Well, do they present it and you presented us with the best information, or how is that achieved?
So through the Chair, everything we do is through our insurance broker, and they go out to all of their reinsurers around the world to get the best quote. So they are looking for the best quote for us, but they are also looking to make sure that they are providing the coverage that they require.
Of course. So how many? I've got two questions that I may ask. How many of these are new insurance companies, or are they just rolled over? Or have we got new companies insuring us for the next 12 months?
I would have to go back to the insurance broker to confirm, but when we had our meeting, there was nothing that he indicated that was a new insurer. Everything looked to be just rolling over, but I would need to go back to him to confirm 100%.
That would be quite, I think it's, well, obviously you know that is reasonably important to check. And the other thing is, do we, as an aside, do we make a lot of claims on our insurance annually, like 20 claims or 100 claims, or...?
It does depend entirely on what's happened. So, for example, a couple of years ago with all the hail damage, there was a lot of claims put in for the vehicles because there was more damage. So it really does depend on the year. If, the main claims that we seem to see are things like the vehicles rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Verloon.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yeah, if Councillor Cameron goes to page 8 and 9, it's actually got a list there of all the different insurance companies broken down into what they're actually covering. The one that I was interested in, the general liability and public liability, basically it's covered by Lloyd's of London, and therefore probably because of that we have no control at all over what the costs are going to be.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. Under personal accident, I see you've got elected members covered. Is that accident only while on council business, or is that cover us for all time?
Rachel, can you answer that?
Through the chair, if you can come back to me, I'll have a look through the schedules right now and let you know what the terminology is exactly. If you can just give me a couple of minutes.
I just put it on to Paul.
Yeah, through Mr Chairman, when you talk about personal accident, in my understanding, is not strictly on council business. It's, for example, if a group manager passed away with an accident, then the council would claim $50,000 under this insurance. It's not for the family of the group manager. It's for the council to fund the additional costs that are going to come about as that person no longer being there, having to advertise for a new position, having to fill in while that person's there. So it's not ensuring the benefit doesn't go to the person's family. It actually is the council that benefits from that money. And my understanding, it does not have to be on, you don't have to have that accident while on council business.
Well, elected members would be the same. It would be to hold a by-election.
Those are the sort of costs that you will face, so that's why we've got that insurance.
Thank you, Paul. Any more questions? Sorry.
Just getting
I look at my own name, you see, that was a bit scary. So, Murray.
cyber. Are we comfortable, given everything that's going on in the world and the increase in cyber activity, that we've got the right level of cyber insurance? Was the only question I was going to ask.
Mr Chairman, cyber insurance is something that I think we only took up a year or two ago. It was a new insurance, and I'm aware of the issues that are going on at the moment in New Zealand with the attacks, and so that's something that we'll be looking at, of what our protection, what our security our own system has to reduce the likelihood of it, rather than perhaps the insurance cover for it. But the insurance cover is some money, but it's not the real risk here. It's the risk of your data disappearing or being made public. So yeah, we could certainly have another look at it, but I think the priority is trying to look at what our security level actually is in cyber.
Activity's gone up 9 times, I think, since COVID started. So.
Yeah.
How many times?
9, I think.
9 times more. Thank you for that. Any more questions? We've got a recommendation to council. Do we've got a mover and a seconder of that? It's on page 6. I'll move. Thank you. That's Mr. Brown, Mayor Brown, and Councillor Cameron. We go to number 6, development contribution postponement for.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say it was going to be a short meeting, but everyone in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now we go to item 6. Development contribution postponement for SCMT Holdings Limited. It's on page 12. Paul or Rachel, you want to speak to us?
Mr Chairman, these are here because any request made for a postponement or development contribution has to be done by council. There's no delegation to staff to deal with these under the current development contributions policy. So you'll see there's a couple on the agenda, and I'll take them as read.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you.
Miller.
I was just going to ask, is it usual to get these requests or is it because of sort of the the COVID situation at the moment, or is it just something that does happen from time to time?
Through Mr Chairman, no, it's unusual to get this. There's been 3 this year, but I can't recall any going to council in the previous year, so it is unusual, and I'm not sure whether it's COVID or not.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mayor?
This site, is it the old site that the old Russell Moonvale building was on?
Correct, yeah.
So wouldn't there have been development contributions paid on that previously, which would roll over into this new building? Why are they being asked for new ones, is my question.
We go to Jane.
Through you, Mr Chairman, I don't know the exact details of this, but I do know when they calculate this contribution, they will look at what was there before, and depending upon how long it's been empty or unused, credits may be applied, but that extra will be added if there are going to be more things there than there were before, which is probably the case with the gym.
With the gym, yeah. Thank you for that. Councillor, not Councillor Wilson, but
I have no question.
no question. There are no more questions. We've got a recommendation to council on page 12. Do I've got a mover and a seconder on that? I've got Councillor Falloon is moving it. Is the seconder Councillor Wilson? Everyone in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Sorry, better read out what we've got there as the recommendation, so people at home can understand what we're doing. The recommendation to council is that council declines the postponement for the development contribution of $11,392.17, excluding of GST, payable by SCMT Holdings Limited on the development at 39 Tancred Street. We've got a similar one in item 7, and that's on page 16. Are there any questions on item 7? Basically the same as the one we just did before. So do we have a mover and a seconder that council declines the postponement of the development contribution of $6,929 inclusive of GST, payable by Liam Shepherd and Lily Spittle on the residential development at 25 Memorial Crescent in Medfin. I've got Councillor Falloon and Councillor Cameron. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now I might just do a small change. Oh no, end of year performance, we do this first. End of year performance report, item 8, page 20. We've got no one here to speak to it. Are there any questions? I think it's self-explanatory, to be quite honest. Councillor Falloon.
Yeah, just a comment I've made before, that sometimes I believe they set the targets like low-hanging fruit. I mean, if one looks at what we're working towards, the community to be informed of, involved, etc. Last year, the 18-19 results were 88%, approval. They set the target at 80%, and we've done 92%. I just wonder whether the targets are actually realistic, and whether they need to be looked at a little bit more closely.
Mr. Mayor.
When Councillor Falloon says you set the targets, it is him and I and us who set those targets, and we're about to set those targets in the LTP, so you'll have the opportunity to change them if you wish then. So it is us, the council, who sets those targets, not the staff. Staff will recommend we set them.
And also we mentioned that previously that maybe the way we are doing it is not the right and correct way of doing it.
I
Because
think we did have a conversation.
he had a conversation about that. Yeah. But as the mayor said, the LTP wants, we will get it calm. No more questions. We've got a recommendation on page 20 that Audit, Risk and Finance Committee received the end of the year non-financial performance report. Is there an,
I'll move that.
that's Councillor Macmillan. Is there a seconder? No seconder. Councillor Wilson, everyone in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillors, I just want to make a small wee change now here. Instead of going to 9, I would like to do point 10, the financial variance report first. The reason for that is I think it will be easier. All the questions will be in here, so the next part will be easier. I'll give you a couple of moments to find that document. And Rachel is there to answer the questions if he can. I think what we will do is what we normally do, we just do page by page. And we can't miss anything, but I will ask Rachel first to explain what we have in our hands and what we're looking at.
So through the chair, this is it's just your standard variance report, but this is for a full year. The only other point I want to note is that this is a draft one because our end of year numbers are not yet finalised until they've been audited.
Thank you for that, Rachel. Let's start on page 2. Any questions on page 2? Page 3 and 4. Five and 6. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My question is regarding roading. I see we didn't get it all spent because of the CBD held us up or things like that. Why do we not use some of that money? It's set aside for roading. Why don't we put some gravel or something on in anticipation of the next year, and that money can be credited to the CBD? We've got money set aside for roading. We've got subsidy all jacked up for it. It surprises me that we carry it over when there is work to do. To me, I'd spend what we've got to spend and be flexible. If it's not going to be spent there, spend it somewhere else, because it means the next year we haven't got to spend it perhaps where we anticipated the year before. We better do a bit of extra resealing or something. Try and be flexible.
Through the chair?
Yeah,
I can answer
yes,
that.
please.
It's purely based on the fact that we are uncertain about how much we're going to spend on the CBD. We really are. We just got to be very careful before we spend anything, that we know exactly what our committed costs are to the CBD before we do that. Maybe in a year's time we can be in a better position to do exactly that.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, just going back to page 4, the summary. I was trying to find it before when you went through it. Basically, our income is down $4 million, and a lot of that is from the fees and charges we didn't get whilst our facilities were closed, but most of it is probably from asset sales that we have not had and the associated profits with that. But on the other side, our expenditure is also down by $3.5 or $3.6 million. So in actual fact, when you look at our summary, even though it's not going to be a good year, it's not as bad as what it very well could have been. And I think the staff need to be congratulated on doing a good job in managing us through what we've come through.
Thank you for that comment. Anyone else? There we go from 7, page 7 and page 8. Nine and 10. 11 and 12. Thirteen and 14, Stockwater. 15 and 16, waste reduction. Mr. Mayor.
Just on the refuse and refuse management, I think it is. There's deficits there, didn't get the desired income that was budgeted for, and it spent more than what it said it would spend. So how do you balance that? Who balances that shortfall? Who makes that shortfall up?
Good question. Rachel? Paul?
So through the chair, so what would normally happen with an activity, it would go into the reserves. And so the following year, depending on what their reserve balance was, that could still be in a positive position. Over time, the idea is you wouldn't have negative reserves, which is effectively like an overdraft. You would then need to fund that in some way, which would normally then be via rates over a number of years that you would claw that back.
Thank you for that. No more questions on 15 and 16. 17 and 18. '19 and 20, community services. 21 and 22, economic development. This is going too easy. 23 and 24, 24 being parks and open spaces. 25 and 26. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. 27, 28. 29 and 30. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 20. You go that fast, Tom, we flick them across here.
Okay, now just tell me, because I can't see that on your screen.
General Reserve Board
Yes.
income down 70,000. What is going to happen to that? Is it general rate going to make it up, or what actually happens?
Through the chair, a lot of the Timor Reserve Board, they're actually making their income from the Ashburton Holiday Park. So in general, they're not receiving rate funding because they are actually receiving income via the holiday park. So that would be, I would assume, without looking at the figures, that the 70,000 down is likely because they would have had less people at the holiday park, especially over the lockdown period.
Yes, but what happens to their balance for the year then, because they've got a debt they're paying off?
Mm-hmm. So again, it depends on what's happening with their reserve balance. So they might have reserves from prior years that have carried over. So we would need to look at that as part of our year-end process and see where they're sitting there.
Thank you, Dad. Paul?
Mr. Chairman, the Timor Reserve Board does have a credit balance, and it's big enough to take that deficit. So, and they'll still be in credit even after that deficit for the year. Okay.
We were in 29 and 30. I just wait till everyone is catching up. '31 and 32. Murray.
Just on the information systems variance, just reasonably substantial variance in terms of the percentage of the budget. So just interested in what the overall expectation will be when those projects are completed in terms of IT projects often go over budget. So where you're at in terms of just the overall budget versus actual, as opposed to budget versus total budget, if you get what I mean.
Mr. Chairman, it might be easier if we answer that one when we get to the carryovers, which has got the next item, which has got a lot of what those projects actually were, and I can probably answer it in more detail when we get there. There was also a deliberate decision to sweat our assets a wee bit more, to provide for when we move to our new library and civic centre, that some funds would be held back to put new equipment in at that stage. So we are sweating our desktop assets a bit more than we normally would.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions regarding this? If not, we're going to 33 and 34. Councillor Floon.
Yeah, I see we were forecast to pay $4.2 million worth of debt repayment. We've paid exactly zero.
Through the chair, we have actually made repayments through the year, but we have drawn down more debt. So it looks like zero, but it's actually, we have been paying debt off. We've just been drawing again. There's been a bit of a circular
Sorry, Paul.
system.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah. So this has been paid off.
We have made payments, but then
Payments.
we have drawn more debt down
Oh,
as well.
okay.
So it
So
ends up in this net
the same
zero position.
Yep. Oh, we've got you. Thank you. $35.36 net debt and borrowings. Murray.
I think it's more of a big picture question. I think I know the answer to Paul, but in terms of interest rate environment and our GFA and potential negative interest rates and that whole macro situation, just what you're thinking in terms of that, in terms of the overall strategy, if any changes, if any, sort of thing.
Mr. Chairman, there will be a change coming, signalling in our Treasury management policy to increase the bands to allow us to take up more floating interest rate rather than fixed. Floating is cheaper at the moment and will reduce the need for interest rate swaps, which are probably a bit more expensive than the short-term floating rates. But we had a discussion with a bank this morning and with our Treasury advisor, and they're talking about negative OCR rates. And so we're heading into a territory that most of us have not been in before. And it's going to be interesting. And all the debate or the discussion also covered, for example, if you're a corporate and you've got money effectively to invest or let the bank look after it, what you may get is no interest and a holding fee for the bank to look after it, which is quite an unusual situation. So we're not in that, but it is interesting times, and there will be changes that will be requesting Council to approve in the Treasury management policy shortly to reflect the change. The other issue is that when that Treasury management policy was written, there were more registered banks than there are now, and therefore we're running up also against our limits of how much we can put in each bank, which is becoming quite awkward as well. So that'll also come to the Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. 37 and 38. Basically the last two pages. Murray, your lights are still on, or you've got a question?
No, I'm not working the technology very well.
That's it. Just hit it hard. Just hit it hard. Councillor Floon.
I note on page 38, we've actually got advances, Eastfield Investments, which we know about, 158, but we've got Experience Mid-Canterbury Assets Investments of 95k. What are they valued at? Are they valued at cost or fair market value, or is that just a figure that someone's drawn up from somewhere?
Paul.
Through Mr. Chairman, that's a good point. That's been carried in our balance sheet for some years when EMC was formed out of the previous trust, and it was effectively the value of our investment in EMC. That probably needs looking at to see when, in actual fact, what the fair value of that advance actually is, whether it actually has any fair value. So yeah, that's something that has probably been sitting in our balance sheet for the last 3 years, at least. Maybe actually it's way longer than 3 years, but we'll need to have a look at that. Yep.
Something the auditors didn't pick up on.
Chairman, that's correct. It's possibly below their materiality level, but no, they have not commented on it.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Councillor. No more questions?
Sorry, one more.
Yes, you can.
I just don't like the way the rates and the arrears are showing there. To me, I mean, it's all very nice to have nice, pretty coloured columns, but quite frankly, I really don't know what they mean. And I would prefer to have just a simple statement stating what age groups the rates are in arrears by and what percentage have had penalties applied to them, and what our recovery rate is, and also at what stage do we put them into debtor management.
Paul or Rachel?
Mr. Chairman, we can have a look at providing that in a different format, so we'll look at that for the next report.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a recommendation that the chair uses his tablet, because with the paper thing on 2 pages, we're going through that quick. We just haven't got a hope of keeping up. If you did 1 page at a time, we could at least keep up, but 2 pages at a time with a tablet's hopeless. Yeah, the page numbers are different on our tablet.
Okay. That's correct. Next time I will do that. See how we go. So did everyone came to the last page? The last question? Okay. Thank you for that. We've got a finance report, and is someone who wants to say that this committee receives that report? We've got Councillor Cameron and Councillor Verloon. Everyone. What am I doing? Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. I'd like to go back to number 9 now, the carryover funds from 2019-2020 to 2020-21. Rachel is here and Paul is here still as well. So any questions out of this? Or you want to speak to it first? Or are you quite happy as this, Rachel?
Through the chair, I will take it as read. I do just want to point out that we have attempted to break it down for you and let you know which projects are committed. So either there is already contracts in place or the work has begun, in which case we really, the best course of action is to continue it. And we've also tried to point out which projects are, we've called it required. So officers of council have said that there is a need for these projects, but they are not yet committed. So they either haven't started or there is no contract in place for them.
Thank you for that. I was going to do it by page, Councillor Wilson, but I can't do that. So I just try to fire this up. Are there any questions, or do you like to do it page by page? Give me a moment, I'm just firing this up, but it doesn't want to do it. Give me a moment. That doesn't want to fire up properly. My excuses. 28. Try it one more time. Yes, I've got it. Let's do page by page if I can. Page 26. Councillor Verloon and then Councillor Wilson.
Just a point of clarification. I understand it's a carryover request where we haven't spent the money, no issue about that at all. But if I just look at stock water on page 28, where we've got a carryover request of $45,000, but we've also got a loan to be raised of $45,000. Now, to me, that's not funding that we're carrying over, or if it is funding we're carrying over, have we already raised the loan to cover the loan funding carryover?
So through the chair, what we have done here, this was also to clarify it for later on when we are trying to pop it in. So what we've done here is we have tried to indicate how it was funded in the 1920 budget, and so this would have been funded via a loan. So we would carry that through and fund it also via a loan. So there is likely some things in the 2021 budget as far as interest calculations that would have been taken into account for this already. So while the loan may not have been raised for it, there may be elements already in the 2021 budget.
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to explain to me, committed, I guess something's been contracted and the money's already there. Required, is that a most likely we want it next year? Or is there ever a possibility of not required? I don't see any not required in there. So it's sort of a bit double Dutch to me, the difference between committed and required. Of course, I got required money next year too, but I haven't got the money to spend, sort of thing. What's the rationale about all the different...
Councillor Wilson, just don't blame the Dutchman here. I'm just sitting here as chair. So we go back to the Kiwis.
Through the chair. So committed is where we have either started to spend the money already in this current financial year, but it hasn't been included in the 2021 budget. Or we have a contract in place. So we've said that's committed because if we break the contract, obviously there will be financial penalties for that. Required is where the officers of council have told me that their work needs to be done in the 2021 year, which is why I've included it in this report, and it was in the 1920 year. But it has not yet been started, and it does not yet have a contract that we would be breaking if we chose not to do the work. So I've been told that it is still required. It is work that I'm assuming to keep up our levels of service and things like that is needed, but it's not yet committed.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Thank you.
There would never be any possibilities of not required then?
I couldn't say that with 100% hand on heart because I'm taking what I'm being told. So information I have been told is that these projects would be going ahead in the 2021 year.
Paul?
Mr. Chairman, if there are projects that are not required, they won't turn up here at all. They just wouldn't have been requested to be carried forward. So we're not going to put a carry forward saying, ask you for stuff that's not required. It's not there. It's been omitted.
Are there any questions on 28? $29. $30 waste reductions. $31 commercial properties. $32. $33 open spaces. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. All these that are listed as required, were they planned for the 1920 year, but it hasn't been spent, so it's required to do that job in the 2021 year? It seems a hang of a lot of stuff carried over.
Rachel. Rachel.
Yes, you're correct. Anything that's carried over has been in the 1920 budget.
So did we miss it out due to COVID, or what's the reason we had it in and we can't do it?
Through the chair, there's been multiple reasons for some of these. So if we're looking at the parks and open spaces in particular, so some of the, I guess, slowdown was around the domain development plan. I think they had anticipated that they would be further through that and possibly working on some of the projects, and they aren't yet at that stage. So at the time that they make their budgets, they are having to make assumptions on where they'll be with some of these projects, and that just doesn't filter through to actuals, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. Hamish.
Through you, Mr Chairman, the most of the explanations are contained in the variance report that you've just considered. So the idea of giving you the variance report is that you'll get an explanation from managers as to why expenditure or revenue is different to the budget. And then this report is explaining which amounts we want to carry forward to still get that work done. But so the variance report is where you should look to understand why a particular something is not on budget.
Correct, and that's the reason I changed them around. 33 we were, 34. $35. $36.
It was just that
Yeah, go for it.
that IT question. I can see that the detail there behind the individual classes, and Paul was talking to it before as well. So it was really just trying to understand in the overall program management of the big elements of spend there, how you're going in terms of where you think you might be going to end up in that area of risky spend, I suppose.
I suppose through you, Mr Chairman, we'll definitely have all the carryover spent this year, except for some hardware upgrades, where again we're trying to delay those, but some of that delay was outside our control, i.e. the rural imagery flyover was simply not, that's in a Canterbury contract through ECAN, simply wasn't done. The contractor that they'd used didn't get the flying done, so that's late. And then there's some major upgrades that we've got going on, the phone system, the health and safety solution, the new website, which simply was slipped in their timetable. But the website, for example, is supposed to be finished by the end of this year. The health and safety solution is rocketing on and is going to be finished by October. The new phone system, that is one that has got a bit delayed because we went out for tender and had presentations, and none of the tenders after presentation actually fitted our requirements upon closer investigation, so we're looking at an alternative for that. So yeah, those ones and I's have been a bit slower, but all those projects will effectively be done by either Christmas or during this financial year. There will be some more, of course, in the current budget that is that are on top of this.
You're not expecting any big blowouts in terms of budget?
Not blowouts in terms of spending, no. No.
Thank you, Paul, for that explanation. Page 38. $39. $40. Mr. Mayor.
There's quite a few carryovers there, so there's good reasons for carrying them over. So what steps have been put in place for the financial year we're in now, so we don't get as many carryovers when we're sitting here this time next year, because we've still got all this year's to work to do, and we've got some of last year's to do, and with the water and wastewater, we've got an extra year's, which we signed up for last week, to do as well. So what systems are in place to ensure that work is done?
Through Mr. Chairman, there is no question that the year ahead is going to be a difficult year for the capacity of our staff and our organisation to deliver on the quantity of work that is in front of us. We're acutely aware of it. We will be doing our level best to make sure that we get as far through the work as possible. One of the things we're also mindful of, though, is wasting council money simply to tick a box to say we've spent it on a particular project. So we're still mindful that we want to have effective spending focused on the projects that we've said that we will do. And so an elevated level of attention at the exec team level on project spend. But I share the implied concern. There is a lot of work in front of us through this year with the carryovers, the current year's work, plus now the extra from the Three Waters delivery plan. So it will be a challenge, but we're doing all we can via staff highly focused on delivering on those projects.
Thank you for that. So it's not that we are catching or trying to grab too high. You know, we're not trying to do too much in one season or in 1 year. Is it just a combination of the Three Waters, the new building, COVID? Or
If I look ahead, which is where the Three Waters will collide, the year ahead has a lot of work on it that is already programmed by council through various budgets and will be a challenge, no question. In terms of the level of carryovers, there is also some big things at play. As we saw in the variance report, COVID impacted in a lot of areas in terms of our capacity to get things done. And there is no question that the CBD redevelopment, which is pulling a whole host of budgets across a 2-year period, and then there's the timing of expenditure at an arbitrary date like the 30th of June, has also had a significant impact on the carryovers. The question, and we've had this question and discussion around this committee previously around our ambition or optimism to get stuff done. And I think there is potentially some truth to that. At the time that we prepare budgets, we don't think it's true. At the time that we prepare budgets and council discusses work that they would like to have done in the community, we believe at that time that it is achievable. But right across New Zealand, right across every council and many government agencies, there does appear to be an ambitious approach to capital works that regularly is not met. So I imagine that there is some over-optimism in there somewhere. But in terms of our particular situation we find ourselves in, it hasn't been a normal year for getting stuff done, not only because of COVID, but COVID and then a range of other projects we have on. And it's even things like our assumptions as to how much of a long-term project we will spend at a particular date, i.e. the 30th of June. So one of the reasons for under-expenditure is in the Library and Civic Centre project. Now we're still going to build that building and we'll complete it in 2 years' time, and we'll be doing all we can to make sure it conforms with the budget. But whether or not we had spent by the 30th of June 2020, 2 years before it's completed, exactly the amount that we anticipated 18 months before that when we set the budget, is a reason why things can mismatch. So there's a host of complications in there. There's no one answer or one reason, but I do share the intent of that question. I think at times we may be a little ambitious with our capacity to deliver on worthwhile projects.
Thank you for the explanation, Hamish. We are on page 39. I'm on page 40. 41. That's the end of this report. So we've got a recommendation. I've got it on 25, but I just make sure that we've got the same. There's a recommendation, yeah, on page 25. So we've got a mover and a seconder for that. The recommendation as it stands is that the Audit and Risk Finance Committee approves the request to carry over the unspent funds from the 2019-2020 year into the 2020-2021 annual plan as detailed in this report. Do I've got a mover and a seconder? Yes, I do. I've got Councillor Falloon and Councillor Macmillan. Everyone in favour, please say aye.
Mr Chair, can I
Oh,
just
sorry.
make a comment, please?
Yeah.
We've got two options on page 39 and 40. One is that we can approve all carryovers as detailed.
Sorry, I
the
missed that. Yes, you're correct.
Or the second one is we can approve carryovers relating to committed projects only. I think for the sake of flexibility as far as the council team is concerned, I think we should be approving all carryovers as detailed, because if we only approve the committed ones only, we don't know when resources are going to become available to complete these contracts. So you don't know when you're going to get an independent contractor who gets cancellation and can come along and do a job a bit quicker. So therefore, I would approve all carryovers as detailed.
In option 1.
The option.
Yep. Sorry about that. So I missed it. It's option 1. So we've got a mover and a seconder. If you're in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you all. This is the end of the open meeting. And can I have a mover and a seconder to go in exclusive public? We've got Councillor Cameron and Councillor Falloon. Can I say thank you to the press for being here? Motion. Oh, yes, I did. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did a motion for going exclusive because we had Councillor Cameron and Falloon.